All right, good afternoon, everybody. My name's Sam, Carter Shamai. I'm one of the board members here at Band. I want to thank you all for coming out today and to welcome you guys here for this show that I'm certainly very excited to be able to see with all of you and the talk that Emily and Gloria are going to have. Before I get into the proper introductions, I'm going to pass it over to Emily to just say a few words of welcome.
Yes, so hello everyone, welcome. We'd like to do a land acknowledgement to acknowledge that we are on stolen land and that this territory is a traditional territory of many indigenous nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people, as well as many unremembered and unrecognized people, indigenous nations. And also, I'd like to acknowledge that many descendants of Black people here were stolen and brought to Turtle Island. I'd also like to acknowledge that there were some Black people here who were put into slavery and who were already living here. So I feel it's important to acknowledge that as well, and to take the time to acknowledge our ancestors and to invite them into the room with us.
Great. And again, I want to welcome all of you here today too. As you all know, we had a chance to take a look at some of the work just before we got started today, and now we're going to have a little conversation between Emily and Gloria. I'd like to give a bit more of a full background introductions, starting with Emily. We'll get to Gloria Swain in a second, but priorities, right? Emily is a PhD candidate at Ryerson in the Communications and Culture program. Emily Swain. She moved here to Toronto about 3 years ago. In addition to her scholastic pursuits, is a performing artist, a dance artist, a researcher, and community advocate. Wonderful Gloria Swain, sitting right next to me, is a multidisciplinary Black female artist, a social justice activist, researcher, seniors rights advocate, and writer. While Gloria's work has been exhibited at the Tangled Art Gallery, the Art Gallery of York University, the Gladstone Hotel, the Theatre Centre, Artscape Sandbox, the Public Studio Gallery, OCAD University, Artscape Gibraltar Point, and other venues, I do believe this is the first time that she's had a solo show on these abstract works, so I'm quite excited to be able to share this with all of you here. I first met Gloria at the opening, and it's such a exciting person to have met, and I'm so happy that we're all here to speak together. Her writings have been included in Cultivate Feminism, Peak Magazine, Marvelous Grounds, and Canadian Journal of Disability Studies. In 2019, Gloria was the Feminist Art Collective Artist in Residence at Artscape Gibraltar, and in 2016, she was the Artist in Residence at Tangled Art and Disability. She now holds a certificate in community arts practice and a degree in environmental studies from York University. Before we get right into this conversation, I also want to thank Scotiabank for their ongoing support, and in particular support for their Emerging Artists program, which is how we've been able to share this first solo exhibit by Gloria here with you all today. I think that's enough out of me, and I'll move back and get on with it. As Karen mentioned before she went, she's just out getting some refreshments. I think that there's going to be a lot to unpack in this conversation. While we do want to have some questions, some of it might be better suited for sort of more private conversations afterwards. So with that, I will in fact get out of the way and let's get started. I'm so excited.
So thank you, Gloria, also for asking me to interview you. So this is about the exhibit No More Than Your Shoulders Can Handle. First, I'd also like to mention a trigger warning. So some of the things we might be talking about might be very triggering. And so if you feel like you need to leave the room or take care of yourself, come back, that's fine, we understand. And so you are a Black visual artist, abstract artist particularly, and there have only really been a handful of modern and contemporary Black artists that have come to light in the recent years. Alma Thomas is a female visual abstract artist, among other names such as Frank Bowling, Gillian, Edward Clark, Norman Lewis, Alvin D. Loving, and Robert Reed. And however, Thomas's work has only been recognized when she was the age of 80. And so there's again that parallel with you, who is an elder. And
I'm a baby. I still got time.
And so tell us about your work.
Okay, everyone has time to look at it. So what I'm going to do is walk you through it. I make notes because some of the work is I'm still healing from it. So I need to control what I say and how I interact, but just in case, but I will not. Okay, my work. Okay. I have been creating art and writing poetry since I was a little girl. I've always used a creative outlet for trauma, which includes childhood trauma. I think I started doing abstract work in the early 80s. That's another journey that I'm going to leave there for a minute. My work is rooted in my frontline activism and my desire to highlight issues of discrimination. I call it the isms: racism, sexism, classism, and now I get to add ageism to it, against particular black women and black trans folks. I've been painting for over 30 years, so these are a collection of those paintings that I painted, but I kept to myself because I wasn't ready to, I guess, expose myself. So people ask, how do I know when it's time, when they're ready to be shown? It's like a mother. It's like, eventually your children are going to go out, going to leave. So for me, my paintings, I know when they're ready to hang. I know when I'm ready to share. And talking about the other abstract artists, I only knew about Alma Thompson, who was 85 for her first showing at the Whitney Museum. The other gentlemen are African American. I think one is from Guyana. There's not a lot of black abstract artists. There's not a lot of spaces. So basically I did the work and I kept it because I didn't have a platform. I didn't have any work to show. But I can relate to Alvin D. Loving, who was an African-American abstract painter. His work is known for the hard edge extraction, but he used fabrics, which I use fabric in some of my work also. And he used different colors to represent the complicated relationships that he met through life, which is similar to what my work shows. The next one is Robert James Reed, another African-American black male artist. He used abstract symbols, colors, and deeply textured brush strokes to create his work. So I can relate to those two. But it's really, all of these artists are in their 80s or 90s. So I'm in my 60s. What? So I'm just wondering why it took so long for us as black abstract artists to find that space to show the work. Even for me, trying to navigate through these art spaces is difficult. The only way that I got here is Carrie came to look at something else, and she saw the work that I've done, and she was like, I didn't know you do abstract art. I'm like, yeah, I've been doing it for 30 years, but I never had the platform. So hopefully this work opens up, not just for me, but for other black women artists, Asian artists, to come out and show their work also. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go through the different collections. The three in the room when you come in, those are my blue collections. So I call those three chaotic. But if you notice, I don't label any of my work because I think people should have the opportunity to look at the work and get out what it means to them. I don't do visual points for people to look and grab what they see. I let you guys look. What pulls you into the painting? That's the point. That's the visual point. Those three, when you come in, chaotic. I'm going to read this. Hopefully I can make it through. For this collection of blues, I use a combination of various shades of blue and geometric shapes with sharp edges to represent how chaotic my life was during various periods and my fight for survival. I also add splashes of warm colors, the yellow, the red, sometimes brown or beige, to represent my resilience. The color red represents that little piece of hope I've always held on to. I use layers to create textures to illustrate perseverance. In every piece, you're going to see a white shape. I call it the isms. That's me navigating through spaces, through issues, dealing with a lot of stuff. But I'm always facing the isms. They're always there. You can't get away from it. You can even go in a washroom there, you see a painting, which is like, we can't get away from the isms. That's part of our history, part of today. So those three there, I started doing those in 2015. So sometimes I would paint to like deal with some of the issues that I was going through, but I eventually had to set them aside because I couldn't deal with it. So because sometimes when you're going through stuff, there's no words. So for me, it's like I put it aside and I eventually went back to them. The one in the middle is purposely made out of wood to show that even there's easy times, there's good times, there's bad times, to show that the time changes and your situation changes. Hopefully those pieces will like show other, especially young black women, that yeah, life is shit, but we can make it, we just have to hold on. So let's see. The one in the washroom, I already told you about that. We can't get away from the isms. You're going to take a pee, you're going to see my isms. I'm sorry. Oh, and I also I also use humor to deal with a lot of stuff that I go through. The title of the exhibit, The More Than Your Shoulders Can Handle, is something my grandmother used to say. You go to her with one problem, she'll just rub your hand. Baby, the Lord don't put no more on your shoulders than He knows you can handle. So throughout my life, even though like things were really bad, I knew that I could make it through. Because, you know, black baby Jesus had my back. So let's put it that way. So then we go to the two pieces, the two larger pieces. They're actually painting on top of painting. So I purposely did that because as a black woman, it's like, I have to smile. We've been taught, well, I've been taught growing up, is like, you don't tell people your business. You deal with it. You just keep smiling, put on a pretty dress. So those two large pieces represent, I call them a painting within a painting. So we have to cover up a lot that we go through as black women. We have to smile, dress pretty, you know. And it reminds me of a saying by Audre Lorde. There is no such thing as a single issue struggle because we do not live single issue lives. Mm-hmm. So if you take a close look, you can see like the different movement happening. And one of them, I use my hand. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's like the anxiety is so bad, I can't hold a brush. So my hands become my tool to create art. My favorite one, Shattered. It's broken glass. And if you notice, the edges are, I guess, uneven, shattered, rigid. That's about abuse. Abuse by partners, abuse by community, abuse by family, and there's a white spot there also that looks at police violence against black women, black trans people, that we don't talk about. So for that, I also, I'm going to throw this out there for you. Violence against black women is a very strong topic for me because no one addresses it. Throughout history, especially from slavery, there was no laws to protect black women. The laws today They're the ones, they don't protect black women. They're the ones killing black women. So I've been researching the stories of the black women killed by police. So far I have 280 names. There's more. Each month, each week, there's a name to add to it. I've lost count. So what I do, I take the research, I find their stories, and I create zines. So I've created 120 stories of women killed by police and black trans women murdered. I usually give these out because I don't sell them. These are not my stories to sell. As an elder, they're my stories to tell. So this is a work in progress. So what I do is like I want people to bring awareness to what's happening to black women. And because when one of us is killed, there's no media, there's no big large. There is a movement, Say Her Name. We need to do more than say her name. So what I've done is like I found photographs. It's hard to find, there's not a lot of photographs of them. To find their stories, just to share their stories, to let people know that majority of these women killed by police have mental health issues. They're known to the police with mental health issues. And most of them are killed by white cops who said they feared for their life. I'm gonna leave this right here. Mama done it. So then it brings me to, that's the end of my blues. So for the one out there, the piece out here, it is a blue collection, but this is one is special because there's something others don't, this has one thing that others don't have. The black splattered. That's black blood. So I didn't title it Black Blood. Oh, let me just do a shout out. But it's okay to come in. The installation is good. You become a part of the installation when you walk through it. The piece out there is like, I purposely made the blood black to see if anyone would pick up on it, and a young black man picked up on it. He's like splattered black blood. Even the piece in there that I call Shattered, a young black girl, she sat and she looked at it, and she said, "That's me." I'm like, "What do you mean?" She said, "He beats me." So you don't really have to title the work. I like for people to look at it and pull out how they relate to it. So then comes into my black, white, gray area. So I'm just going to read it from here because I can't see that. These pieces are about history and holding on to black stories. It's about staying strong and lifting each other up in different times. It's about hope, perseverance, unity, and reclaiming my place. As an elder who is largely pushed aside and ignored in so many spaces, I want to create conversations that include stories of Asian black women and artists. Most of these pieces are textured because they indicate unknown and erased black histories. For example, the unspoken impact of colonial violence and enslavement that continues to hurt generations of black communities. My own struggles with mental health that is associated with violence and poverty is proof of that. So since we're here, I'll just talk about the pieces. The white piece, I call it the residue of colonization. No matter where we go, what we go through, we still deal with the racism, the white supremacy, we still deal with it. So the residue was created with a matte gel to create the texture. Then we skip over to the black piece. I call that keloids, which represents when a slave was beaten, they would heal like that. To create that texture, I used just regular soft tissue paper. I forgot the name of the book, of the store book, but Toni Morrison talked about the tree, when they were beat the tree. So in the gray one, the fabrics of oppression, which comes from the white supremacy and the black pain that we still experience in the black community. And it's actual fabric up under there to create that texture. Okay, so I'm going to talk about these three pieces, and wait, then you got it. Okay. So the three pieces here, these three pieces reflect my struggles with mental health issues. My depression is political because of the isms that I just spoke about, and how black mental health is often non-existent, unimportant, and too often left out of the conversation around mental health. Navigating through spaces and places has proven to be difficult, for me at least. I find that creating art is meditative and necessary for my own survival. There is movement with sharp edges in each piece. That represents that even though moving through it cuts me, I cut back. By being resilient, by being a person, by pushing on. Now in the last piece over there, you see there's not a lot of movement. So during that period, it's like I was still fighting, but it was hard. I didn't give up. I'm still moving, but I'm moving slowly. Because even strong black women have to cry sometimes. So after that, go ahead. I think I did. Let me have some tea.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Gloria. I especially want to acknowledge how much courage it takes to exhibit your work. While, as you say, you're still healing from a lot of this. So thank you so much for sharing. At first, I was going to ask you what brought you to visual abstract art, but I think I'm actually curious to know what is the importance or the role of exhibiting your work?
It's to start a conversation about black mental health, because all the stigma still exists, especially for black women. So we got to be strong. We have to lift everyone else up. But when we're down, there's no one to lift us up. And as an elder, I'm hoping that other young black women will see, oh, Auntie Gloria did this, I can do it too. So it's about starting a conversation and being, opening up that journey. It says it's okay to just say one day, sorry about this, but fuck it, I'm gonna take a break. So, you know.
Yeah, and even when you talked about the woman who saw your painting at the back and who was able to say, that's me, just the words and the conversations that you've started are so important, allowing people to, start to address some of these things in their own lives. And as we were talking, you mentioned that, so you're an activist.
I'm badass. like that, what?
You mentioned them. And you mentioned to me that you grew up in Selma, Alabama.
No, I don't know.
Oh, no, okay, Alabama.
My relatives.
Okay. And that played a big part in your activism. So you were, you started doing activism in like the 1950s.
Oh God, I think I was born into it.
Okay.
Born in the South. I think, this is a quick little story. I started grade school like 2 years after integration, after segregation was. And it's a white school, of course. So when I got a little 7-year-old kid, so you have to imagine 7 years old, go in, the seats are assigned. So near the window are all the black kids, the dark-skinned black kids. Near the door, I guess if something goes down, the white kids can leave. So there was white kids there. So the high yellow, what they call us, they put us in the middle. And I kept wondering, well, why aren't I with white kids? So at that early age, you know, it hits you. Something's not right. And just going to the local store with my father, who was very dark-skinned, he was West African and Native American, going to the store with him, to the white store, we would get to the top, I'm a little girl holding my dad's head, right? I feel safe. He would like slowly push my hand away. So it didn't dawn on me then that he was protecting me because of all the racism in the South. Yes.
And so, do you feel like all those experiences are reflected in your work, or how do they relate to this exhibit in particular?
It's in me. Because when you don't address something, the childhood trauma, if you don't address something, you carry it with you. Yeah, you pass it on.
Mm-hmm.
So my thing is, I look at my grandmother, I look at my mother, and I think about the way that they dealt with a lot of stuff, and I see myself. I'm trying to stop, but it's in here, so it's hard to change. I know when I was my first husband, I had to try twice, girl. But anyway, it was very abusive, and I would go to my mother's house, a black eye, bloody nose, and she'd just clean my face and said, "Go home, that's your husband." I'm like, damn, he hit me. So that's that, and so when my oldest daughter went through that, it's like I told her, it's time to move, it's time to go. You don't stay, you go. So I say it's like we need to stop that cycle of oppression that we unintentionally pass on to the younger women.
Yeah.
I probably got off track. I told you.
No, you're fine. You're fine. And when you talk about that cycle of oppression, that generational trauma that is passed on, it makes me think actually of the installation at the back. Would you like to tell us, please, a little bit more about the installation?
Oh my goodness. Yes, it's an interactive installation where when you walk by, when you stop, you become part of that installation. And I call that, how do we frame Black pain? How do we have that conversation? How do we bring that to the table? So I use frames purposely for that. And it looks at the Africans who decided to jump off the ship rather than become a slave. That's on one side. On the other side, you look at the Africans who stayed on the ship thinking, okay, I can deal with this. The ropes, the chains, they were thrown over. So it's just, it looks at the lost history, the lost stories, the lost names, the stories we can't get back because we don't know. So how do we bring that conversation to the table? Mm-hmm. It also looks at the stolen Black art. Mm-hmm. So, we're gonna go here forever,
And so you do a lot of work of honoring the ancestors in this exhibit particularly and in your work. And what really touched me was the 3 paintings on this side of the wall and these were specifically to honor your father.
Yes.
Can you tell us a bit more about it and why it was important to honor your father?
Okay, first I'm going to say, like I said, my father, I found out that my ancestors came from West Africa. I don't know what part of West Africa. So when the ship hit the U.S., they were sent to Georgia, Carolina, Florida, and Alabama. My father grew up in Alabama, which was the 3rd largest slave state during slavery. And when we would ask, as children, we would ask him about where he grew up at, about his mother, his father. And he just stared into that space with teary eyes. And my mother would always say, So I don't know if it was too painful or he just didn't know. So this is my way of saying it's okay, So the top picture would be his mother, my grandmother. And if you look closely at the afro, it also turns into a mohawk. And inside of her would be my father, and you see his birth. And the bottom one, he was a farmer, he loved nature, he loved animals. This is death, this is his cycle, which is my cycle. So that's my way. Each time I do a show, I honor my father, and I bring up Black women. Because we need to, and I always tell young people, if there's an elder, talk to them. Get the story. I don't know who I am or where I came from. I don't know what runs through my body. But it's like I get to recreate because I don't know what my grandmother looked like. So for me, it's like I am my ancestors. That's heavy, ain't it?
It's powerful.